The HOA burned my father's car. I spent years rebuilding it. But the HOA vice president said it violated community standards. When I refused to move it, she burned it down. I stood barefoot watching my father's memory turn to ash. I didn't cry. I got angry. I collected evidence, and when she walked into my showroom with her husband, she finally understood. I didn't rebuild that car for my father. I rebuilt it to destroy her. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. My name is Ryan Maddox. I own a luxury car restoration shop called Black Ridge Motors. What I do is take old, broken, forgotten cars and rebuild them into something beautiful. Ferraris that were torn apart in accidents. Bentleys that rust nearly destroyed. Jaguars from the 1950s that hadn't run in decades. I take metal and steel and transform it. But my real passion started with my father. Every Sunday for 20 years, my father and I worked together in his garage. He would teach me about engines and transmissions. We would talk about life while we worked. The garage was our church. It was where we were honest with each other. My father had a project car that lived in that garage for 15 years. A 1962 Aston Martin DB4 GT. Not finished. Just incomplete. Just waiting. When you're ready to learn, my father used to say, we'll finish this one together. I was never ready fast enough. Life was busy. Work was demanding. I told myself there would be time later. There's always time later, isn't there? When my father got sick, everything changed. He got cancer. Before the cancer took everything, it took his hands first. The doctors said the medication would damage the nerves in his fingers. He would lose the ability to work. Ryan, he said to me that day, sitting in the garage, looking at the Aston Martin, I need you to promise me something. Anything, I said. Finish it, he told me. Finish the car. Every bolt. Every gear. Every detail. I want that car to be perfect. And I want it to have your hands in it. I want it to be ours, even when I'm gone. I promised him. He died 2 months later. It took me 6 years to find the courage to start rebuilding that car. But when I did, I worked like a man possessed. 6 years of Sundays. 6 years of hearing my father's voice in my head explaining what came next. 6 years of my wife bringing me coffee in the garage and finding me crying next to an engine block, not from sadness but from the weight of finishing something that mattered so much. I rebuilt every single part of that car. I imported rare components from England. I learned techniques I didn't know existed. I made it my life's work because it was my life's promise. 3 months ago, I finished it. The car was perfect. Mirror finish on the hood. Original leather interior restored to showroom condition. The engine sounded like music. Every detail was exactly as my father would have wanted it. I sat in that finished car in the garage, with the engine running, and I heard my father's voice so clearly that I had to check the passenger seat to make sure he wasn't really there. I drove that car home to the Arbors at Piner Crest. The Arbors at Piner Crest is a gated community 30 minutes from my shop. Expensive houses. Manicured lawns. Perfect mailboxes all exactly the same height. Perfect hedges all trimmed to regulation length. Everything is designed to look perfect. Everything is designed to make you feel like you're living in a place where rules matter, where order matters, where everything is controlled and safe. My wife and I moved there 2 years ago. We liked the quiet. We liked the safety. We liked not having to worry about anything messy happening near our home. Everything changed the day Karen Delaney came to our mailbox. Karen Delaney is the vice president of the HOA board. I'd seen her around the neighborhood before. She's always dressed perfectly. Perfect makeup. Perfect clothes in pale colors. Perfect smile that never reaches her eyes. She walks through the neighborhood like she owns it. It was Tuesday afternoon when she showed up. I was parking the Aston Martin in my driveway. It was the third time I'd driven it home since finishing it. I was still getting used to the feeling of it, the sound of it, the reality of actually owning this perfect machine that represented 6 years of my life. Karen appeared at my mailbox before I'd even turned off the engine. She was holding an official-looking envelope. She slid it into my mailbox very slowly, very deliberately, like she was sliding a court verdict into place. Then she walked over to where I was standing next to the car. "You're violating community appearance standards," she said. Her voice was sugar-coated poison. "This kind of vehicle draws the wrong kind of attention. Pioneer Crest is about order. Everyone respects everyone else by following the rules." I didn't say anything. I just looked at her. "You have 72 hours to move it," she continued. "Move it off the property. Store it somewhere else. Or we will escalate this to a formal violation notice with associated fines." I stood there, my hand on the mirror-finished hood of my father's Aston Martin. "That vehicle is insured for over $600,000, I said very quietly. "I built every single inch of it myself. Every bolt. Every gear. Every detail. And it's not going anywhere." Karen blinked. Just once. Just a small flicker. But I saw it. I saw the moment when she realized that I was not going to be like everyone else in this neighborhood. I was not going to let her use her petty little power to take away the most important thing I owned. "The rules are clear," she said, but her voice wasn't as confident anymore. "So am I," I said. She looked at the car for a long moment. Then she walked back to her silver Audi and drove away. But I knew in that moment that I had made an enemy. That night, I took the violation notice out of my mailbox and read it carefully. It cited non-compliant exterior displays and community appearance standards maintenance. It was vague and ridiculous. The car was parked on my own property. It was only visible if you were standing right on my driveway. I showed it to my wife, Mariah. She was worried. "Just move it," she said. "Store it at the shop. It's not worth making enemies with the HOA." But she was wrong. That car was my father's memory. That car was every promise I had made to him. No HOA board was going to take that away from me. 3 days passed. The 72 hours came and went. I didn't move the car. On the 4th day, a second notice arrived. This one was in a bright red envelope. Violation. Fine pending. The note informed me that failure to comply with the initial warning had resulted in a formal violation. A $500 fine was being assessed. If I did not move the vehicle within 14 days, the matter would be escalated to legal action. I actually laughed when I read it. My wife didn't find it funny. She was genuinely worried now. "Ryan, this is serious. They can put a lien on the house. They can take us to court." "Let them," I said. "That car is not going anywhere." That weekend, I did something that I knew would provoke her. I kept my garage door open. I detailed the Aston Martin in full view of the entire neighborhood. I spent 6 hours in my driveway, working on that car, making sure everyone could see it. Some neighbors walked past and nodded. Some looked uncomfortable. A couple gave me a subtle thumbs up like they were happy to see someone standing up to the HOA. But Karen drove past twice. Slowly. Very slowly. Her silver Audi crept past my house at about 5 miles per hour. She was looking. She was watching. She was gathering ammunition for whatever came next. I knew that look. I didn't care. I kept cleaning the car. I kept polishing. I kept making it shine. It happened at 12:17 a.m. on a Thursday night. I was asleep. Mariah was asleep. The neighborhood was quiet. Then Mariah screamed. It wasn't a scream of fear exactly. It was a scream of shock. Of something breaking in the perfect silence. I ran outside onto the driveway. The Aston Martin was burning. Not smoking. Not starting to burn. Completely, totally, absolutely engulfed in flames. Orange flames shot up from the engine bay. Red flames climbed up the windshield. Black smoke poured into the night sky. I watched the hood implode with a sound like a scream. The windshield shattered. The leather interior turned to ash. 6 years of work, 6 years of my life, was burning alive in front of me. My wife called 911. I stood barefoot on the cold concrete, unable to move, unable to think, unable to do anything but watch. The fire department arrived. They put out the flames. They investigated. Looks like an electrical fault, the fire marshal told me. These older cars sometimes have issues with the wiring. Something probably shorted out. These things happen. Bad luck. He was wrong. I knew he was wrong because that car had no battery installed. I was still working on the electrical system. It had no fuel. The tank was empty. There was nothing in that car that could have caused a fire. Someone burned my car on purpose. I stood in the smoke and the ash, and I didn't feel grief anymore. What I felt now was something colder. Something harder. I started taking photographs. I documented everything. The direction of the flames. The pattern of scorch marks on the concrete. The chemical smell that wasn't right for any materials that should have been in that car. My hands were shaking because I knew what had happened. I knew who had done it. I didn't have proof yet. But I knew. The next morning, I received an email from the HOA. The subject line read, "Community Reminder, Fire Hazards and Compliance Enforcement." The email warned about abandoned vehicles, non-compliant displays, and unauthorized exterior modifications. It talked about community safety and property values and the importance of maintaining standards. There was no mention of the fire at my house. No sympathy. No concern. No acknowledgement that anything unusual had happened. It was like Karen was rewriting reality. Like she was blaming the fire on me. I called my insurance agent, Letitia Hayes. Letitia is ex-military. She specialized in fire-related claims for high-value assets. She was sharp in a way that made liars nervous. The fire department says it was an electrical fault, I told her. But it wasn't. That car had no electrical system. No battery. No fuel. There's nothing that could have caused that fire accidentally. Prove it, she said. I requested the security footage from the HOA's camera system. The camera was mounted on a pole at the corner of my street. It should have captured the entire fire. I submitted a formal request. Karen responded personally. She said the camera system had experienced a temporary outage during the time in question. Just a coincidence. No usable footage exists. That was a lie. I knew it was a lie because I had worked with the vendor that installed those security cameras. One of my clients was a regional manager for the company. The system ran on looped redundancy. Even if the power went out, the footage should have backed up automatically for 7 days. Someone would have had to deliberately delete it. Someone would have had to manually override the system. Karen was covering for something intentional. I made a call to Devin Rausch, the regional manager at the security company. Devin owed me a favor. I'd restored his 1971 Dodge Challenger 2 years ago for less than half the market rate. I need to know something, I told him. Off the record. Could someone delete security footage from the system you installed at Piner Crest? Yeah, he said. But it would show up in the audit logs. Whoever did it would leave a digital fingerprint. Name. Time. Access code. Everything. Would that access code be tied to a specific person? I asked. Hypothetically, Devon said slowly, yes. And it would be weird because why would a board member need to wipe footage if it was just a random fire? Let me check the logs, Devon said. Call me tomorrow. When he called back, he didn't waste time. Someone used an HOA board member access code to delete the backup at 2:12 a.m., he told me. 3 minutes before the fire department was called. The access code was tied to a user account. K. Delaney VIP. Karen. Karen had deleted the footage. Karen had deleted the only evidence of what happened that night. I needed more. I needed someone on the inside who might be willing to tell the truth. That person was Frank Bellamy. Frank was the HOA treasurer. I'd seen him at meetings before, always sitting quietly in the corner, always looking uncomfortable. He was a thin man with glasses and a nervous way of adjusting his watch band. 3 days after Devon confirmed the deleted footage, I saw Frank at the community greenhouse. The HOA was holding their monthly garden walk. I wasn't there for the plants. I was there for Frank. I watched him for a while. He stood alone near the koi pond, fidgeting with his sleeve cuff. When Karen approached another board member nearby, Frank didn't smile. He didn't speak. He just turned and walked toward the far bench like he wanted to disappear. I followed him. Frank, I said evenly as I approached. Can we talk? He flinched like someone expecting bad news. I filed 2 formal requests for the security footage, I said. Both denied. The system supposedly went down for 1 hour. Exactly during the fire. Did Karen authorize any override? Any emergency data access that night? Frank's jaw moved like he wanted to say something, but he settled for adjusting his watch band instead. You're the treasurer, I continued. You sign off on maintenance invoices. Camera systems. Did Karen authorize deletion of camera data? His silence said more than any admission could. The system logs would show it, I pressed. You'd know if something was pulled. Frank stared across the koi pond like he wished it would swallow him whole. I joined the board to balance budgets, he finally said quietly. Not to cover up fires. That was it. Not a confession. Not yet. But a crack in the wall. He stood up suddenly. I have to check on the east planters. But, he turned slightly back toward me. Ryan, for what it's worth, your dad was a good man. Everyone remembers him. Then he walked away before I could respond. But he'd said enough. I went home and pulled up the HOA vendor log that I'd archived from a public PDF 6 months earlier. The security vendor's name was Secure Link Solutions. Their local branch was run by Devon Rausch. I called him again. I need to know about an invoice. March 9th. Did the HOA pay for any special services on that date? 1 second, Devon said. I heard typing. Yeah. March 9th. There's an invoice for a one-time override fee. Listed as Remote Deletion Request plus VPN Access. Signed by Karen Delaney. It was paid from HOA discretionary funds. How much? I asked. $2,500. $2,500 to delete evidence. Is there anything else? Any other charges? I asked. Actually, yeah. Something weird. The invoice shows approval from 2 board members, but the second signature looks off. Different handwriting. I only know that because my wife used to do document verification for the military. She trained me to look for that stuff. Whoever signed that second approval, it wasn't the actual person. Karen forged it. Forgery. That was a crime. That was documentary fraud. Is there anything that connects this to the fire specifically? I asked. The date, Devon said. The invoice is dated March 9th. When was the fire? March 11th, I told him. 2 days later. There's your timeline, Devon said. She paid for the deletion service 2 days before she needed it. That's not reactive. That's planned. I thanked Devon and hung up. That was the piece I needed. That was the thing that connected everything. Karen didn't pay for the deletion service as an emergency response. She paid for it 2 days in advance. She planned to burn that car. I sat in the garage where my father's workbench still stood. I ran my hand along the burnt wood. The concrete floor underneath was stained with ash, but I'd never washed it out. I wanted the reminder there. I scanned the access logs. I backed them up in 3 different encrypted folders. One on a USB drive. One in a cloud archive. One on a private network server at the shop. Then I made a call to Letitia Hayes. I've got a new angle for the Aston Martin case, I told her. You free for coffee tomorrow morning? Bring your evidence, she said. If you've got what I think you do, this won't be a claim. It'll be a liability investigation. Letitia showed up early to the cafe the next morning. Black blazer. Sharp eyes behind gold-rimmed glasses. She didn't waste time. What do you have? She asked. I handed her the envelope with the access logs. She opened it. She skimmed through. She stopped at the 2:12 a.m. entry. I saw the slight parting of her lips. I saw the pause in her breathing. This is from their security system, I said. Pulled by their vendor. Off the books. The account used is Karen Delaney's. Manual deletion of video backup during an open fire investigation, Letitia said quietly. That's obstruction if we prove intent. She accessed it before the fire was even called in, I added. System pings at 2:12 a.m. The fire department wasn't called until 2:17 a.m. 5 minutes after she deleted the evidence. Letitia's jaw clenched. She's on the HOA board, I continued. She's overseeing the property where the incident occurred. Letitia leaned back. She drummed her fingers once on the table. Then she locked eyes with me. Do you want a claim or a case? She asked. I want both, I said without hesitation. I want to be made whole. And I want her to burn. Then we move carefully, Letitia said. Give me 2 days to file a formal investigative escalation. That triggers subpoena access for all HOA system backups, communications, and correspondence around the event. Once that's filed, she can't touch anything without legal oversight. She's already pretending I burned the car myself, I said. Letitia smiled without any warmth. She'll be less smug when our legal division copies the board on the first notice. As we stood to leave, Letitia hesitated. One more thing. If she's this deep in the cover-up, odds are this isn't the first time she's buried something. That stuck with me. It lingered as I drove back to Piner Crest. Rules here weren't enforced equally. Rules here were weaponized. And Karen was the one holding the sword. Frank slid the flash drive across the table at a coffee shop the next morning. No bag. No note. Just the bare stick, cold against my fingers. He didn't look at me. His eyes stayed on the window. I copied it last month, he said quietly. System mirror from before the fire. Karen didn't know I had root-level access for audits. I stared at the drive in my palm. You had this the whole time. She scared me, he admitted quietly. She still does. I didn't press. Do you know what's on it? I asked. Frank nodded once. Full log trails and emails from her HOA inbox to her husband Tobias. One references removing the obstacle in Maddox's driveway. My breath hitched for a second. She used those exact words, Frank said. He stood before I could say anything else. I don't want to be involved, he muttered. But I also don't want to be complicit. Then he was gone. I sat there, staring at the flash drive. This was no longer suspicion. This was proof. At home, I loaded the drive into an isolated laptop. She'd kept everything. Karen's inbox was a monument to quiet corruption. Dozens of messages marked private use or off record. But then I found it. March 7, 10:04 p.m. 2 days before the fire. To Tobias Delaney. Subject, the car. If Ryan refuses to comply, I'll move forward with the plan. The obstacle in the driveway will be handled. I've warned him twice. He's leaving me no choice. She was going to remove the obstacle. She was going to make the problem go away. She was going to burn that car. I transferred a copy to a secured hard drive and made backups in 3 encrypted locations. Then I called Letitia. I have them, I told her. I have emails from Karen to her husband discussing removing the car. I have the access logs. I have the forged invoice. I have everything. Send it all to me, Letitia said. 15 minutes later, she called. If your evidence holds, she said slowly, this becomes property sabotage with intent to intimidate. That's civil liability and potentially criminal conduct. I could hear papers rustling. She was already reclassifying the case. By 6:30 p.m., the community clubhouse buzzed with activity. Residents filtered in. Most silent. Some whispering. A few nodded to me. The room held more than 30 people. More than any standard meeting in years. Karen stood near the podium, clipboard in hand, dressed in her usual pale green cardigan. Tobias sat in the front row, arms crossed. Frank was already at the board table. At 6:59 p.m., Karen tapped the mic. Good evening, she said, her voice syrupy and brittle. This board-only session has been convened to address internal concerns. Public commentary is not on the agenda. She looked straight at me. Karen rattled through an agenda that included non-compliance signage, confidentiality breaches, and investigative rumors. She never used names. Then, halfway through her third item, Frank stood up. I'd like to introduce a motion, he said calmly, voice steady. To postpone all punitive action until we receive clarification from external counsel regarding the pending insurance and legal reviews. Karen froze. That's not within. Yes, it is, Frank interrupted, holding up a printed copy of the bylaws. Page 14. Section 3. Emergency meetings are not exempt from procedural safeguards during active investigations. Karen's face tightened. Frank laid out everything. The access logs. The emails. The invoice with her signature authorizing deletion of security footage during an active fire investigation. The room murmured. Karen tried to recover. She tried to turn it around. But then Letitia stood up. She wore civilian clothes. But her voice carried weight when she spoke. Miss Delaney, Letitia said clearly, I'm here on behalf of Capstone Insurance and their legal division. Your misuse of HOA surveillance and documented attempts to interfere with an active investigation are currently under review by both civil and criminal legal teams. Gasps rippled through the room. Letitia stepped forward, holding a white envelope. This is your formal notice of claim intervention. You are required to preserve all related communications, financial records, and board interactions dating back to March 1st. She placed the envelope on the board table right in front of Karen, then turned to the crowd. I'd also encourage any homeowners with past disputes, fines, or threats issued by the board to contact our legal office. The room was completely still. Karen didn't speak. Karen didn't show her face in Pinecrest again. By morning, her name was stripped from the HOA directory. A quiet resignation. No formal letter. No press release. Just a sterile update on the community website. Tobias listed their house for sale 2 weeks later. They moved out by month's end. Frank stopped by my shop not long after. "I thought you'd want to see this," Frank said, handing me a folded newsletter. Inside was a notice of policy reform. The board had voted to reinstate oversight on discretionary spending. Install third-party audits for all surveillance access. Dissolve Karen's executive privileges. "They're calling it the Maddox Clause," Frank said with a tired smile. I didn't laugh. I just nodded once. Letitia called that same afternoon. "City Attorney's Office is reviewing your case," she said. "There's talk of pressing charges for obstruction, misuse of HOA funds, and tampering with evidence. Your claim is finalized. Full payout plus damages. You'll be compensated for the car, the property, and emotional distress. You'll be made whole." I walked out to the garage and opened the new door. Steel reinforced now. Painted the same dark gray that Karen once tried to fine me for. On the lift stood the replacement. A 1962 DB4 GT Zagato. Not the original that was gone. But this one would carry a name. The custom plate read DA62. Not for show. For legacy. Mariah came in behind me, setting down the polished gear knob I'd kept on my bench. The original one from the Aston. Black leather. Silver trim. Still etched with my father's initials. "You're really going to rebuild it again?" she asked. I ran my hand along the curved fender. The paint still faintly smelled of sealant. "Every piece," I said. She leaned her head against my shoulder. "You're not just rebuilding the car," she said. "I know," I said. "I'm finishing what he started." Outside, the neighborhood had changed. Not the grass or the mailboxes. The people. The silence wasn't fearful anymore. It was cautious respect. They'd seen what happened when someone stood up. Just steady. Just unwilling to be pushed. 1 week after the board meeting, Letitia sent me an official update. Karen Delaney had been formally charged with 3 counts of obstruction of justice, misuse of HOA funds, and documentary fraud. The charges were serious. The evidence was overwhelming. Her forged signature on the invoice alone was enough to send her to prison. But Karen didn't go to trial. She took a plea deal. 6 months of community service. Financial restitution to me of $750,000. Her name would be entered into the public record as someone who destroyed evidence and tried to cover up a crime. Her marriage fell apart within months. Tobias filed for divorce, claiming he'd had no knowledge of her activities. The house in Piner Crest sold at a loss. A young family bought it, probably having no idea about the history embedded in the deed. The HOA underwent complete reform. Third-party auditing. Public records management. Term limits on board positions. The bylaws were completely rewritten to include protections against selective enforcement and abuse of power. Other homeowners came forward with complaints. Fines that had been issued to them but ignored when applied to Karen's friends. Permits that were delayed or denied based on personal preference. It turned out I wasn't her only target. I was just the one brave enough to push back. Letitia's investigation opened doors for similar cases in other communities. Her firm became known for taking on HOA abuse cases. She called me 8 months after Karen's conviction. "You started something," Letitia said. "Homeowners in 4 other communities have filed complaints based on your case file. 3 more investigations have opened in neighboring counties. You didn't just fix your problem. You created a template for fixing broken systems." Frank became the new HOA president. Not because he wanted the position, but because the neighborhood needed someone honest. He served with integrity and fairness. He reviewed every violation. He corrected past injustices. He made sure that rules were applied equally to everyone. He called me 1 year after taking the position. "The new system is working," Frank said. "We've reversed fines on 7 homeowners. We've established clear criteria for all violations. And most importantly, we're no longer using rules as weapons. How does it feel? I asked. Heavy, Frank said. But right. It feels right. And I know your dad would approve. I spent that entire year rebuilding the new Aston Martin GT Zagato. The same timeline as the original. 6 years of promises compressed into 12 months of focused work. Every piece done right. Every bolt tightened with care. Every detail restored to perfection. The day I started the engine for the first time, I sat in the driver's seat with my eyes closed. I listened to the sound. It wasn't the same as the original. But it was beautiful in its own way. It was new. It was a second chance. It was proof that something destroyed can be rebuilt even better than before. Mariah sat in the passenger seat. When I opened my eyes, she was smiling. Your dad would be proud, she said. I know, I replied. I drove that car through Pioneer Crest one Saturday morning. Slowly. Deliberately. Not hiding anymore. Not afraid. Just a man in a finished car, completing a promise he'd made to someone who was gone. Some neighbors waved. Some took photographs. The neighborhood had learned something important, that standing up to bullies, quietly and steadily, actually works. That refusing to accept injustice creates change. That sometimes the power really does belong to the person willing to be patient, careful, and absolutely relentless in pursuit of the truth. I never saw Karen Delaney again. Not in Pioneer Crest. Not anywhere. She disappeared into whatever life people like her find when their world collapses. Last I heard, she moved to another state. Started a new life. Probably found another neighborhood to torment. But she never found another Ryan Maddox. Because what she didn't understand was that I wasn't just fighting for a car. I was fighting for my father's memory. I was fighting for the principle that rules should protect people, not control them. I was fighting for the right of an ordinary person to stand up against abuse and not be destroyed for it. My father used to say that time wasn't something you earned. It was something you used. I used mine well. The new car sits in my showroom now. Not for sale. Never for sale. It's a monument. A monument to my father. A monument to persistence. A monument to the principle that justice takes patience. Sometimes people ask me if I regret standing up to Karen. They ask if I wish I'd just moved the car and avoided all the trouble. They ask if it was worth it. I always tell them the same thing. Yes, I say. It was absolutely worth it. Because what they don't understand is that this story isn't really about me. It's about every person who's ever been pushed around by someone with power. It's about every homeowner who's been selectively targeted by an HOA. It's about every person who's ever wondered if standing up to injustice was even possible. It is possible. It's possible if you're willing to be patient. It's possible if you're willing to collect facts instead of emotions. It's possible if you're willing to find allies who believe in truth. It's possible if you're willing to let the truth speak for itself. I learned something important during this whole process. Standing up to bullies doesn't require being louder or more aggressive. It requires being smarter. It requires documentation. It requires finding witnesses. It requires understanding your enemy's weaknesses. It requires patience to let them make mistakes. Every time Karen escalated, she left evidence. Every violation notice was documentation. Every email was proof. Every camera deletion was a digital fingerprint. Every forged signature was a crime. She defeated herself by trying too hard to win. That's the thing about people like Karen. They believe they're invincible. They believe they can hide behind rules and power forever. They don't expect anyone to fight back. They don't expect anyone to be willing to spend months gathering evidence. They don't expect anyone to be patient enough to build an airtight case. But what if everyone fought back like that? What if every person who was bullied took the time to document everything? What if every person who was treated unfairly found allies and built cases instead of just accepting injustice? Sometimes that's how the most dangerous stories start and end. Not with noise. Not with violence. Just with steady, patient, relentless pursuit of the truth. Just with one person who refused to accept injustice. Just with someone who had the courage to stand in their driveway and say, "No. Not this. Not today. Not to me." And when you say that, and you mean it, and you're willing to do the work to prove it, sometimes everything changes. For the community. For the neighborhood. For everyone who watches and learns that they don't have to accept abuse from people who hide behind rules and power. That's the real victory. That's what lasts. That's what my father would have wanted all along. He always told me that the most important battles aren't fought with aggression. They're fought with precision. With patience. With truth. I walk through that garage every single day. I see my father's workbench. I see the scars from the fire. I see the spot where my car burned. And I remember. I remember why I fought. I remember what I was fighting for. The new Aston Martin still sits in my showroom, ready to be driven, ready to carry my father's memory forward. Every time I get behind that wheel, I hear his voice. Every time I drive through Piner Crest, I think about what changed. And I know that it was worth it. Because in the end, that's what justice really is. It's not about winning. It's about standing up. It's about refusing to be broken. It's about finishing what someone you love started. And that's something no HOA board, no matter how powerful they think they are, can ever take away.